Hello, my friends. How's it going? Welcome. Happy Wednesday or whatever day it is by you. My name's Keith. If you are new, I'm your meditation here on this channel, Meditation Breaks. If you are not new, then you already know that. So each week on this channel, we look at meditation, a different topic related to meditation. Sometimes it is like more very basic, other times a little bit more advanced, but regardless of whatever our topic is, we always start the same way, and that's a very general introduction into meditation, because this might be your first time. For many people, it often is. Hello, mother. How are you? Joan is my mom. Hey, Beverly. Whether or not this is your first time ever meditating or you have been meditating for years, this is a great place for you, right? So the cadence here on this channel, we'll start, like I said, with just an introduction to meditation. What is it? How does it work? What does it mean? Why bother? And all those questions that we kind of like are surfacing when we may have been like, oh, maybe I should try meditation. Like, what actually is that? So, hey, Patricia. So we'll start with that, and then we'll do a little short breathing meditation to just kind of settle in. And maybe you've tried breathing meditation before. It's become a lot more common, which is great. But the key is here, it's going to be short. All right, so don't worry. I'm not going to leave you to, I don't know, ponder your life for an hour. I'm going to guide us through a very short meditation just to get everyone kind of on the same page with, hey, this is kind of how meditation works. Right? Then we're going to get into our topic for today. And our topic for today is kind of like a continuation of last week, but not really. We're going to talk about what it means to have flexibility of mind. Right? So we'll save that discussion for a little bit later. Sound good? Hey, Shelly, welcome back. Okay, so if you are a returning viewer, you've heard me ask this question a million times, but if you're new, maybe you've never really thought about this. Like, what actually is meditation? When we hear that word, what do we think about? And sometimes we'll sit there and we'll try to like come up with like a really cool answer, like, oh, but like if we're really like instantly, what do we think about? Hey, Zach. Instantly, what we think about is somebody sitting on the floor with their eyes closed and their hands like this, right? They usually look really relaxed. That'd be nice, right? And we're like, oh yeah, they look relaxed. I like that. Lucia, hello. So this is what I'll call our generic image of meditation. Right? It's everywhere. It's an emoji. Like we see it all over the place. And so it's no wonder that when we think of this word meditation, that's what comes to mind. And for good reason, this is a very common way to meditate, sitting on the floor, cross-legged, with your eyes closed, concentrating. But this is a way to meditate, one way to meditate. It is not the real definition of what meditation is. So I think a more apt definition for meditation would be it is a technique, it's a learning tool to train your mind to become really familiar with a specific thing. Now, that thing can be a thing, or it can be an idea or an emotion or whatever. But the goal of meditation, whatever type we're doing, it's all based on this idea of familiarity, becoming really familiar with a particular thing we want to become familiar with, right? So that in and of itself is kind of a weird definition, because we don't think of our mind becoming familiar with it. We don't use that phrase. My mind is becoming familiar with things, but our mind is becoming familiar with things constantly. Right? Everything that you have ever learned is based in your mind becoming familiar with it. So if you think about maybe you can ride a bike right now without even thinking about it. The old classic example of riding a bike. But there was a time when you were learning, and when you were learning, it was not easy, right? It was very difficult. What do you mean I got balance on these two wheels, right? So then they give you training wheels, and then they take them off. You're like, no, don't do that. Why would you do that? I can't balance on two wheels. It was a really tough thing. Maybe you don't ride a bike, and so this doesn't relate to you. But anything you've ever done, whether it is kind of rudimentary as walking or talking or riding a bike, it started as something that was really unfamiliar to you, and now is something that is really familiar to you. And so, what is the what's the output of that? Like, what's the result of that change? Riding a bike becomes easier. Riding or walking becomes like second nature. Tying your shoes, not a big deal. Right? We don't have to think that much or commit that much energy or effort into doing it. So this idea of familiarity, becoming really familiar with something, equals it showing up more regularly, becoming a little bit more second nature. That is the connection that we want to keep in mind here when we're talking about how meditation relates to becoming familiar with stuff, right? Because this is our superpower as humans, right? And whatever reason you're here for, maybe it's to help with anxiety, maybe it's to be, kinder to yourself. Most people get into meditation to just kind of relax a little bit. But let's say you're here to relax, right? Meditation doesn't actually relax you. Like, it's not if I meditate, I'm relaxed. What meditation is doing, it is teaching you to become really familiar with this kind of relaxed version of yourself, which exists in all of us. It's there. We want it to come out more often, right? And right now, it takes some effort to stay calm, cool, collected all the time. But it's in there, right? It's not like meditation is creating that. Meditation is a conduit to become so familiar with relaxed you that what happens? Same as riding a bike, same as walking, all this, right? It just starts to become more of our default persona, right? We don't have to try so hard to be relaxed, right? And as a result, we're more relaxed. And so we think meditation has done it, right? But really, it's just a learning tool for us. Lucia, great question. Isn't there a danger of something becoming too familiar and being on autopilot? Yes. And so what I'll say, it's a great segue. Thank you. So this is our superpower, but it also kind of can be our curse, right? So we talked about using meditation and this idea of familiarity to get in touch with our relaxed self so it shows up more regularly. But it works both ways, for good and for bad, right? So if you think about something like anger or anxiety, we talked a lot about anxiety last week, right? But we can use anger as an example. We don't have to try to get angry, ever. We never have to stop. Hey, hold on a second. I got to get angry at this thing that just happened, right? Why? We got a lot of practice getting annoyed. And so our mind is very used to that kind of feeling, right? Now patience. Oh boy, we got to try for that one, right? Sometimes it can flow pretty easily, but a lot of times we might have to be like, hey, I just got to, think about the situation for a second. I got to create some space. Right? We talked about that last week too. It doesn't kind of come as naturally, it seems, right? This is purely, it's not because we're like some angry person. It's purely because our mind is more familiar with getting annoyed than being patient, right? And this is good because the fact that our mind kind of learned to get, have a frustration comes so easily to it means that we can kind of do the other thing, right? Because we weren't born being, getting all frustrated at the traffic and stuff like that. This is learned behavior, right? Patience is you're in good company. And that example of frustration and patience, they call them like opposing forces. They're a really good example of this, of how, like you said, becoming really familiar with something makes it show up more often, but that's not always what we want, right? So with meditation, we're going to start to choose what we want to become familiar with. Right? because right now your mind kind of just is used to doing what it does. It just has been doing its thing for X number of years, and now we're like, hey, maybe we're going to change the way that we do this, and your mind's like, no. Right? So it is a training. Practice is key. You nailed it. It is a training just like anything else, right? And just like the first time you tried to ride a bike, just the first time you tried to walk, it might be a little tough at first, right? But over time, it becomes easier, right? Learn behavior based on environment and interactions. Yeah, totally, right? So if you kind of have been in an environment that is one way for a really long time, it stands to reason that that is going to feel very normal to you, right? And so you might be gravitating more towards that kind of mindset, right? But again, good news, because that means we can do something about it. If it was like, well, it's written in stone, oh, well, I'll just be annoyed at the traffic for the rest of my life. That's not as empowering as if we have a little control over it, right? So that's what we're trying to do with meditation. We are using this to choose what we want to be familiar with and work towards that, right? Okay, so that's all well and good and sounds wonderful, but how the heck do you do it? So when you begin learning meditation, almost always they start with breathing meditation. For good reason. There's a lot of good reasons. It's pretty straightforward. I think the most important is that it travels well, right? So this is a really important aspect of meditation that is kind of hard to get behind at first. We don't really need specific conditions to be able to do this, right? Sometimes we think, I got to be in a place that's very quiet. I can't have any noise. People in that apartment upstairs are always stomping around. I can't meditate here, right? Or I got to go to this lake. Then I just feel peaceful, right? But if we kind of require a lake to be peaceful, if we require perfect silence to be peaceful, no, we're not always going to have that. So using your breath, starting to train with using this thing you have all the time with you that travels very well, it doesn't require any sort of like external conditions, just breathing, is a really good way to start to learn that you can do this independent of having perfect conditions. Now, those perfect conditions might be nice. How long is this class? I usually teach about 45 minutes to an hour. If you're looking to just meditate, we're going to do that in about 5 minutes, and then I'll continue the class. But it's also recorded, so you can always watch it if you got a split. Cool. So we're going to do a little breathing meditation now, and more formally, it's called single-pointed concentration. All right, so if you want to be fancy about it, that's what you call it. And what that means is exactly what it sounds like. We are focusing single-pointedly on something. So we're not multitasking, which is tough for us. We are good multitaskers. Even if you think you're not, you are. Everything you do is multitasking. Your mind is constantly flitting between things all day long. So we're going to start to train our mind to not do that. And we're going to focus so single-pointedly on our own breath that something cool is going to start to happen. All those thoughts that are kind of pulling for our attention in our mind, there's not going to be as much room for them, right? You think of our mind as kind of like it's got finite space. We're packing it full of furniture, right? We're going to put a big armoire in there, right? We're going to focus, so there's not much room for all the other little stuff, right? So we're going to focus so single-pointedly on our own breath that all those other thoughts are going to start to just fade a little bit into the background. Very similar if you ever felt in the zone working at work or something like that. And we're going to just practice doing that in a little bit of a loop. So what do I mean by that? There's 3 steps to breathing meditation. Step 1 is we're going to choose to do this. Sounds corny and not important, but sometimes we accidentally have a meditative experience, which is awesome, but we want to start to train in doing this, teach our mind to do this more on our command here. So we're going to just, for now, say to ourselves, I'm going to focus on my breath, and that's it for the next couple of minutes. Right? And then I'll be guiding you through this breathing meditation, and we're just going to focus on breathing. And then whenever you notice your attention has drifted a bit, maybe you're thinking about work tomorrow, thinking about a sound you heard or something somebody said to you, we're just going to be like, not right now to those thoughts. That's our little saying here, not right now. We're not labeling these other thoughts as unimportant or bothersome or wrong, just not now. Right? We're in control of our mind and our thoughts, and so we're dictating where our mind is going to be. And right now, it's on breathing. So we will say not right now to those other thoughts when we notice, and we'll just guide our attention back. Right? So it's a little loop. And sometimes we got to do this loop a lot, and that's fine. You are meditating, you are practicing, this is working. Sometimes we think, oh, if I ever get distracted even once, I'm not doing it right. No. Meditation is not about never getting distracted, but about becoming really aware of when you are and being able to do something about it, right? Cool. So that's a little intro to what meditation is, and now we're going to do a little breathing meditation together. So first things first, you may notice I'm not sitting on the floor. I'm in a nice, comfy office chair. So you can sit on the floor if you like, or a cushion. You can lay down. You can sit in a chair. It doesn't matter. Again, there is no... You don't need specific conditions in order for this to work, right? So find a place that's comfy for you. And relax a little bit. You can go ahead and close your eyes, and I'm going to guide us through probably about a 5-minute breathing meditation. Okay. Whenever you start a meditation, it's good to take a moment and check in. Ask yourself, how am I feeling right now, in this exact moment? Maybe you're tired. Maybe you're energetic, happy, a little melancholy. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. Whatever you're feeling right now is perfect. We're not doing anything about it. We're not judging it. We are just noticing. Practicing being an observer of our own mind. Having checked in, you can now make a choice, a promise to yourself. Choose to focus single-pointedly on your own breath, breathing in and breathing out, very gently and very naturally. You do not need to change anything about the way you normally breathe here. No need to take big, deep inhales or forcefully exhale air. However you normally breathe is perfect. In and out. Very gently and very naturally. As you begin to relax just a little bit more into your seat. Very smooth, gentle breathing. In and out. At some point, you may notice your mind drifting a bit. It's no longer exclusively on your breath. Maybe you're thinking about something you have to do later after this class ends. Or maybe something that happened earlier today. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. When you notice your mind drifting in this way, we can just say not right now to those thoughts. We will get to them later. And then guide your attention back to breathing in, breathing out, very gently and very naturally. Single pointedly focused on each moment of each breath. See if you can follow the air as it makes its journey into your body when you inhale. Really picture that air moving into your lungs, feeling your chest expand. And then following that same air as you exhale. Watch it dissipate back into the atmosphere. A moment-to-moment interest, fascination with breathing in and out, very gently, very naturally, as you relax even more into your seat. Keep bringing your attention back as many times as you need to. Doesn't matter how many times you get distracted. We're just practicing noticing when we are, and then bringing our attention back to our breath. That is meditation. You are meditating right now. You are training your mind to be calm, to tap into naturally peaceful you. You're training your mind to focus on what you want to focus on, to become familiar with the things that you want to become familiar with. And right now, the only thing that we're focusing on is breathing in, breathing out, very gently and very naturally. So just for the last few moments, just enjoy sitting here with your breath relaxing. No need to think too much about anything. Just take a little time for yourself. Okay, and when you're ready, you can open your eyes. How'd that go? So it's pretty straightforward breathing meditation, nothing too fancy there. It was 3 steps, right? We might have had to do them a lot, but it was 3 steps. We're choosing to focus on our breath. We're noticing when our attention drifts from it, and we're bringing it back, right? And you might be like, wow, my mind was all over the place, which shouldn't be that big of a surprise because when have you ever done this before? So your mind's not used to doing this, right? Our mind is used to doing whatever it wants, and 99.9% of the time it's juggling a lot of different thoughts, a lot of different things. So when we ask our mind to focus on one thing, right, particularly something kind of that are like our breath that we don't really think about a lot. Sometimes our mind's like, what are you doing here? Right? There's some resistance. But as Lucia said before, it is a practice. The practice is key here. It's like anything else. It just takes a little time to normalize this. And the more familiar you become with doing this, the more familiar your mind becomes with doing this, your mind's going to just kind of settle in a little easier, maybe even look forward to it. Wouldn't that be nice? Right? So this is just a little preview of what breathing meditation is, how it works. There's a lot of different types of breathing meditation. We can count our breaths, which can be helpful if we're somebody who finds that we're like very anxious a lot. And we cover a lot of that here on this channel, but that's just a little intro to breathing meditation. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but there's a big old thunderstorm going out by me. So if my screen suddenly goes black and you don't hear me anymore, then you know you know why. I probably lost power. Okay, so we're going to move on to our topic for today, and our topic for today is about developing like a flexible mind, which is kind of another weird phrase, right? When we think about that, and it is somewhat of a continuation of last week, right? So last week we did a crash course on anxiety. We tackled in one class what I usually tackle in two, and here I am extending it. So a quick recap from last week in case you missed it. If you're interested in that, you can watch the entire thing on my YouTube channel. But we talked about the 3 kind of tips for starting to use meditation to help with an anxious mind, right? The first one was developing good recognition, right? So that's the first word, recognize. Good recognition about when we're getting anxious. And what I mean by that is earlier on in the process, right? So if you think about anxiety or any kind of negative mind state as like a forest fire, starts really small, pretty manageable. If we don't notice that there's a fire, it will spread and it becomes a lot harder to manage. So keeping an eye on our mind throughout the day is a really good way to start doing this. This is a technique called mindfulness. You probably have heard of that word before. It is very commonly used. And maybe you're like, I don't really understand what that is. So mindfulness is an active awareness of your own thoughts, kind of like a moment-to-moment basis to the best of your ability, for the purpose of responding skillfully to whatever's going on in your mind. Now, at first you're like, well, I can't just walk around thinking about what I'm thinking all day, right? True. We have stuff we have to do. So developing mindfulness is a really important technique, and we kind of have to start by forcing a check-in. Beginning of the meditation, what did we do? We checked in with ourselves. This is something we do not do regularly. We normally just go about our day, and then we're really frustrated or we're really anxious, and we're like, oh, kind of feels like it just came on suddenly. So practicing checking in, whether it be setting an alarm or doing it at the beginning of a meditation, is really good for beginning this idea of practicing recognizing what's going on inside of your mind. And then we talked about, okay, I recognize that I am kind of seeing some of the warning signs of me getting anxious. What do I do? How do I use meditation to help with that? And we covered 2 things. This idea of acceptance, which we hate that word, but just not wishing this away, just acknowledging, you know what, I'm feeling a little anxious right now. My mind is feeling anxious right now. That's okay, right? Some not letting ourselves panic over it is, I guess, kind of where we go. And then creating space, right? So this is a huge aspect of meditation. We could teach many classes on this idea of creating space. But if you think about physical space, right? I got a thunderstorm actually over my house right now. So I'm like, oh boy, I hope I don't lose power, right? Now, if I was, 4 states away, and on the phone with my friend, they're like, oh, there's a thunderstorm here. Like, I wouldn't be that worried, right? Yeah. So like space changes our perspective of things, right? A thunderstorm is a thunderstorm, but how close we are to the thunderstorm affects how we respond, right? So the same is true for our mind, mental thoughts, right? So when with something like anxiety, it's like a big old storm cloud right over our head, and we're right under that cloud, and so we are reacting, as you might imagine. We're kind of panicking. We're, what if this feeling never goes away? I don't want to go to this event, whatever it is, right? Um, Creating some space lets us look at that situation little differently with a couple different perspectives, right? I won't go too much into that because that was last week, right? So that, lucky for us, is kind of built into meditation. We just created some space in our mind by focusing on our breath, right? All the other stuff that's going on, maybe it's just moving a little further back into our mind. We're creating some space, right? So then we've recognized we're kind of accepting, creating some space in our mind, and then what are we going to do? Right? So the kind of third aspect of using meditation to help with anxiety, and it's not just anxiety, it's pretty much any type of negative mind state that we want to work on, is this idea of what I'll call reframing. Is another word you probably heard before. It's called many different things, but reframing it's pretty common, so I'll just use that. So what does that mean? Reframing. Does anyone know? Like reframing a house? I don't know how to do that. So I'm not going to use that as an example. What about like a picture? Okay? Reframe it, right? It was in a specific frame, right? And, maybe it was like a very eloquent gold inlaid frame around this painting that we had. Right? And then we're like, I'm going to reframe this. And then what happens? So we take it out of that frame, we put it in another frame. And the frame sometimes changes how we're looking at the painting, right? And in the same way that is true, this idea of reframing our mind can hold those same properties. So the process of reframing in terms of meditation or your mind is really about perspective, right? So looking at things from different perspectives. For example, let's say you and your friend are out to dinner, right? And your friend is telling you about this thing that happened at work. They're super worked up about it. Really bothered by it, right? And they're very anxious about maybe talking to their boss about what happened, whatever, right? And they're like, I don't know what to do. I can't stop thinking about it. Like, what would you say to them? Right? What kind of advice would you give to them? Right? Generally, the advice that we'll give our very good friend is pretty reasonable, right? We're like a little detective, and we're looking at the situation through a bunch of different angles. We're like, oh well, kind of seems like maybe you should approach it this way. Like, whenever we were giving advice, it always seems like it's so easy, This is because that storm cloud that we were talking about before, the thunderstorm, that's over your friend's head right now. And so we have space from it. And as a result, we have a very kind of objective perspective of it, right? So that's one perspective, right? Now, if the roles were reversed, it could be the exact same situation and our response is totally different, just like we were saying with the thunderstorm, right? So the idea of practicing reframing, changing perspective, is sort of like a check for us. Normally, we just kind of react, right? Our mind feels a certain way, we react, and that's it. That's the way, right? We don't always take time to do the little investigation. And sometimes after the fact, we do it. We wish we had done it earlier. But today we're going to do a meditation that's kind of geared towards training on shifting perspective, right? And what is the goal of all of this, right? All this talk is to create mental flexibility, right? Because right now our mind is not that flexible, right? We encounter things, we sort of like, unbeknownst to us, label them as good, bad, desirable, undesirable, and that's the end of that, right? And we'll change our mind sometimes, but like, our mind is working so quickly and kind of making these choices so fast that we often feel like we don't have time to investigate. And so we just kind of go about things. Right? So what we're going to think about today is we're going to start to kind of break this habit of not investigating our initial kind of thought about things, right? We're trying to develop a mind that is a little bit more flexible, because the more flexible our mind is, the more we can adapt to the things that are going on, the unexpected events, all the stuff that we have to deal with in life. We can adapt to it and still keep a happy mind. That's our goal, right? It's similar, like, you think about flexibility, like body flexibility, like a gymnast or something, right? They can like contort their bodies in incredible ways to like do these, bend around a bar or something. I don't know. But the same is with our mind. We want our mind to be flexible, right? Hey, Selena, how's it going? So something, an example that I like to use for this, and the goal here is to use an example that is kind of, I don't want to say silly, but like, you probably don't have that strong of an opinion on, and then we can start to extrapolate it across the other things we think about, right? So let's imagine you and I are out to dinner. Hello. We are out to dinner, and we are at this restaurant, and they bring out a complimentary item. I don't know why. Maybe you're famous. That'd be great. All right, I'm hanging out with you. You're famous. They bring out a complimentary item, and that item is your favorite appetizer, right? Whatever that is. I don't know what that is for you, but it's, oh man, they know you well, right? So they bring this out, and you and I are both looking at this, and you're like, wow, that's my favorite. It's so good. And I'm like, oh no, I don't like that at all. Right? Even like me, I'm like, oh, I have a little bit of a, oh no, I don't like olives or whatever. Right? So you and I are now at dinner, and we are looking at the exact same thing, appetizer, right? It's not like they brought out an appetizer for you that is really awesome and one for me that is not. We are both looking at the exact same appetizer, right? You are like, oh man, I get just salivating, like, I can't wait to eat this. Me, I'm like, whoa, no. Oh, right? Totally opposite experiences of this appetizer right now, right? But it's the same appetizer, right? Again, it's not different. I know it sounds weird, but it's important, right? Because what does that mean? You and I are both looking at the exact same thing, and we're experiencing it two totally different ways. What this means is that the experience of this thing is flexible, right? It's not as if this appetizer is inherently incredible and I'm wrong for, not having a taste for it, and it's also not the other way, right? It's not inherently one way or the other, right? And so because the appetizer itself is not inherently delicious or not, there's something else going on. What is the difference between you looking at it and me looking at it? Our minds, right? You, like your mind, you're like everything about you, like your mind views this as delicious. My mind views this as not delicious, right? So this is a really important concept, and it's kind of a silly example, but it is one of the most important concepts in meditation, and particularly with using meditation to kind of develop a more happy and flexible and like positive day-to-day mindset, right? Because we normally don't think that the appetizer can be the other way. We're like, no, this is good. You're crazy. This is the best thing ever. Right? We normally don't take the time to think, well, actually, it is just a food and it's kind of being interpreted by two different people. So that's my opinion of it, right? There's some investigation that goes into it, right? And yes, Lena, this is very difficult. Very difficult, right? Law of attraction, change your mindset. You can change your life without focusing more on positive thoughts. Yeah. So like the idea here, nailed it, right? Like our mind plays a way bigger role in our experience than we think, right? That's the takeaway. So let's now look at that idea with something like anxiety, right? So I shared this with you guys last time, but I'll share it again. Like I got into meditation a very long time ago for clinical anxiety and depression, and I've struggled with that my whole life. And one of the things that I, for whatever reason, particularly I get very anxious about, kind of have a phobia about, is itching. Right? Now, some of you maybe share that, but probably most of you, when you have an itch, you're like, and then your life proceeds. Right? Now, for me, whenever I have an itch, right, because I'm so familiar with this kind of itch equals bad, itch equals anxious, like my mind has made that connection. Even just like thinking about itching, sometimes I start to feel a little anxiety, right? Now, it's not like my itching is unbearable and yours is not, right? An itch is an itch, right? Different levels, but like generally, itch is an itch. So how come I'm so anxious about it, right? Because my mind believes through familiarity, right? Reinforced over many years that itching equals bad. And I start to go down a rabbit hole of like, what if this never goes away? I don't like this feeling, whatever. You, on the other hand, boop, boop, done, right? So same thing, itching, two totally different experiences, right? So the exact same idea of you and I at dinner with the appetizer was a little more lighthearted, and you and I looking at a very personal thing for me, right? It's the same logic. It's not like well, one of those applies to this, but the other doesn't, right? It's just that when the cloud's over my head, right? It's very hard to do this, but the logic is there, right? And the takeaway, just like the takeaway of you and I at dinner, is our mind plays a much larger role in our experience of this. My mind is playing a very large role in the experience of this itching, right? Which is very, very important for something like anxiety or really like any negative mind state, because if we start to teach ourselves that, if we start to believe that, then we are starting to learn that there is flexibility. It is not like itching equals bad. Itching can be annoying. I might not like it, right? But itching in and of itself is not bad, right? My mind state is contributing to some degree in this experience, right? Now, this is a very deep topic. It's probably one of the deepest topics in meditation, and it's a little bit more like out there, esoteric, I guess, what I would say. It's a little more advanced. So I don't want to like stay on that too much longer, but even this concept, thinking about this, like, oh, I wonder if like there's another way of looking at this, and like, is one of those totally correct 100%, and the other person that's, they're totally wrong, they're mistaken, or is my mind thinking of it this way and their mind's thinking of it that way, right? That level of investigation on situations, feelings, things we're anxious about, this is the first step into creating flexibility, right? Because eventually, just like riding a bike, just like learning to walk, or anything else, we are going to become so familiar with the fact that, yeah, you know what? There are a lot of different ways you can look at this, that we don't have to try so hard to see all the different ways to look at these things, right? We don't have to do this whole activity that we're doing right now. Our mind will just kind of be a natural investigator of things. And we will investigate from many different perspectives, and then we'll decide what is the best path forward, or like how we should react in a much more kind of natural and healthy, like mentally healthy way. You're intrigued. Good. Yeah, this is so like this, while it is a little bit more advanced, I do think it's really cool. Like this is what is known in kind of meditation world as wisdom, right? So here we'll define that as knowing the way things are versus the way that they appear to be, right? It appears that appetizer is delicious, right? That's the way it appears, right? But the way things are is that appetizer is an appetizer, and our mind and all of our past experiences with this or that are contributing to this thing being delicious or not, right? It's a subtle change, but a very important one. Cool? Okay. Yeah. So this is I know it's a lot of I don't know. It's a lot more thinking than sometimes, but this is a big part of meditation, because we're trying to change our mind to be a little bit more flexible, so we can adapt a little bit more. So we have to think about these things, right? Cool. Okay, I want to do a short meditation with you guys just to close out the evening, and we're going to do a meditation on this, right? So on this idea of perspective. Cool? Cool. Or reframing, whatever you want to call it. Okay, go ahead and get nice and comfy once again. You can change your seat if you would like to. And you can go ahead and close your eyes. Once again, let's just take a moment and check in. How are you feeling right now? What is your mind up to? No need to compare it. Before is done. We're just focusing on now. We are practicing mindfulness, an active awareness of your own thoughts moment to moment, for the purpose of being able to respond in a skillful manner. And having done that, you can now very briefly, we're just going to turn our attention to our breath again, just to settle back in. So guide your focus back to breathing in and breathing out very gently, very naturally. Allow yourself to settle back into your seat. I did a lot of talking today, a lot of thinking. So right now, we're just going to slow things down. Breathing in, breathing out. Gently, naturally. And if you start drifting a bit, thinking about something you got to do later or tomorrow, you can just put those thoughts aside for the time being. Guide your attention back to your breath. Breathing in, breathing out. Very gently, very naturally. This is breathing meditation in which we are focusing single pointedly on our breath. But we can meditate on anything. And right now we're going to do a little meditation on this concept of reframing. So, only thing that you need to do is just kind of follow along and just focus on what I'm saying. And then if you catch yourself drifting, just bring yourself back to what I'm talking about. I'd like you to bring to mind a time that you were frustrated. It doesn't need to be a kind of cataclysmic event. Any time whatever pops into your mind first, time that you were frustrated. You can think about what was going on. Maybe it was like traffic related, we're in our car, whatever. Just bring that to mind to the best of your ability. We know what that feeling is. Frustration. Like we can feel it, kind of visceral. Even just thinking about it. And with that situation in our mind recreated, I'd like you to imagine now that you are sitting with your very best friend, whoever that is, your best friend in the whole world, and they are telling you about this thing that happened to them. And it's the exact same situation that you just brought to mind. Everything about that frustrating situation, it happened to them instead of you. Just imagine it. We're just using our imagination. Really picture it, that they are telling you about this situation. And they're just as distraught as you were, just as annoyed as you were. It's all the same, exact same situation, people involved. Just that it happened to them and not you. Just imagine it. And then we could think about what we might say to our best friend. What kind of advice would we give? What would you say to them? Be honest. No right or wrong answer. Naturally, when we are giving the advice to our friend, we start to see a situation a little bit differently. Even just doing this exercise, maybe you realize that the advice that you give your friend, maybe it wasn't the exact same response that you did in that moment. Two different perspectives on the exact same situation. Two different perspectives that you have thought up. This is just a mental exercise. You have thought of both of those different perspectives. You are an investigator. And so, what does that mean? It means that a situation that may feel very frustrating, our mind is playing a role in that frustration. A situation is not inherently frustrating. Our mind state, how we perceive it, influences our experience immensely. And so we can conclude that situations are a bit more flexible, I suppose. It's dependent on the mind a little bit more than we thought. There's a little bit more wiggle room, a little bit more investigation that needs to be done. How would your life change if you could become an expert investigator of situations that you're experiencing? If you could look at things from a bunch of different perspectives before committing to one? How might that change how your mind feels generally throughout the day, your week, your year? Imagine yourself as an expert investigator. Embrace that. Make a promise to yourself that the next time you get frustrated, you're going to do a little investigation here. Maybe even do this example that we did together, just to see if there's any other angles that you can look at the situation from. Okay, when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Hello. So we did a meditation that wasn't on our breath, and it's still meditation. So breathing meditation is a form of meditation, but you can meditate on anything. Only thing that is required for something to be meditation is you're choosing to focus on it exclusively, single pointedly, noticing when your attention drifts, bringing it back. So in this, we were doing a little bit more of what I'll call like a contemplation. We're thinking about a thought, an idea. We're doing like a kind of, we're using our imagination to create like a scenario, and we're trying to, gather some information from it, right? Like, what does it mean that my response is different when I'm giving my friend advice than when I'm like talking to myself about it, right? Well, why is it different when my friend is having, some anxiety that is really bothersome to them, and I have this really very measured response, and then for me it's not? Like, why is that, right? So this is all wrapped up in this very, very big and deep practice in investigating things just a little bit more. So that way we've created some space, and then we can react in a way that is, we feel confident is the right way, right? Cool. Okay. Great. That's our class for today. Thank you. I'm glad that the thunderstorm did not knock out my internet. I live in a mountain town, so it's always a danger here. I'm going to put my email in the chat right now. It is keith@meditationbreaks.com. Oops. That's my email. If you have any questions about anything we talked about today, or anything that comes up as you're meditating on your own, or you just want to share something, feel free to email me. Also, if you're like, hey, this sounds kind of cool, great, come on back. Or I also teach one-on-one private instruction. So if you're like, I really want to focus on like anger, I don't know, whatever. Like, that's why I want to focus. I find that I'm getting angry easily. I want to focus on that with meditation. We can really, kind of hammer that home. So if one-on-one instruction is something you're interested in, you can email me, and we can work out a time that's convenient for you. I do all of my one-on-one classes virtually, so very convenient. It's pretty laid back environment. So if that's interesting to you, you can email me, or if you just want to say hi, that's fine too. Thank you all for being here. I love teaching, and I really couldn't do that without you guys taking time out of your day to be here, to learn together. So thank you. It means a lot to me. You guys are the best. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. Right? So hope you had a good experience, and I'll see you all next week. All right. Take care.